Welcome to this week's video. My name is Paul. So this week I want to talk a little bit about learning to draw. Now, usual disclaimers, I'm not putting myself forward as any kind of guru or an expert on drawing. I'm not saying that I'm highly skilled or anything like that. I'm just some guy that's trying to teach himself to paint and draw. And these are some ideas, some of the methods I've used to try and improve my drawing, and I just wanted to share them because they could be of help to some other people out there. So if you've watched some of my earlier videos, you'll know I got back into art through cartooning in my early 20s. Like most people, I guess, as a child, I remember drawing and painting and things, but then at some point I stopped doing that. I guess like a lot of children, we go through that phase of, I'm no good at that, I can't do that. And most people then, that's the end of their artistic expression. But for me, I was lucky enough, early 20s, I was in a job teaching English, and I found that being able to draw little simple pictures and things on a whiteboard was a very useful skill to have. So I wanted to learn cartooning, because I thought that would be most useful to me. And it turned out it was actually a very good way of learning to draw. And part of the reason is it has a much shallower learning curve. So if you're, for example, let's say you want to draw portraits, whether it's people, animals, you're going to find a very, very steep learning curve. Especially drawing faces, it's really quite difficult to get that likeness. And so when you're trying to do that and it's really, really difficult, it can be off-putting. Whereas with cartoons, you have a lot more leeway, if that's the right word. It has a much shallower learning curve, so you're more likely to have some success early on. And you can build on that success and become more and more ambitious. So like I say, I got back into the cartooning, and these are on screen. These are a couple of examples of these early cartoons, or at least these are scans that I made of those original drawings. There are very, very few of those drawings left. Most of them have been lost or whatever over the years. So these two drawings are at least 30, 35 years old, something like that. And as you can see, at the time, I was mostly trying to copy existing characters. So the one on the left is a Disney character, I think from the movie Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And on the right is Warner Brothers character, Bugs Bunny. So learning to draw the cartoons, it gives you a few things. First of all, you have to learn how to see the big shapes rather than focusing in on the details. So you have to learn how to draw the head, the body, and what those big shapes are. And then once you've got the big shapes and the proportions right, then you can start adding details. And that is a really important lesson. And it sounds so easy, especially if you do a lot of drawing and painting and things. But when you're getting started, it's not something that's immediately obvious to many people. Most of us, when we look at the world, we see lots and lots of details. And so we start to want to draw and paint those details, and very quickly find that it's very difficult to do that. If you can simplify everything down into the big shapes, get those proportions and positions right, and then you can start working on details. And doing the cartooning, it taught me to do that. Just in general, also getting the proportions right, starting off drawing very lightly, slowly building things up. It taught me a lot of useful things just doing the cartooning, I think. So another example, again, very old, 30 something years old, just copying some characters from The Simpsons. So the cartooning was a good start, I think. It was a good place for me to start to improve my drawing ability. The next thing I started doing was drawing and sketching statues. So a lot of towns and cities will have maybe a statue or some kind of public art or something that you can try drawing. Even buildings and things can be useful. And of course they don't move, so you find a place to sit down and you can spend a bit of time trying to draw them. The lighting might change, but at least they're not going to move. So when I look at these old cartoons and sketches like this, I can see lots and lots of mistakes. But again, that's not the important thing. When you're learning to draw, when you're learning to do anything, you're going to make mistakes. And you have to get over the attitude that everything I do must be perfect. If you're going to think like that, that's going to hold you back. I know certainly, as I say, when I was younger, I used to teach, and I was trying to teach people English. And you did get some people who could just, they didn't care. If they're going to make mistakes, they're going to make mistakes, and they just tried. And those people really tended to make quite a bit of progress quite quickly. A different type of person was terrified that they would make even the smallest grammatical mistake or mispronunciation, and so they tended to say very little. And of course, if you want to speak a language, you have to speak the language. If you just sit in silence and listen, you'll learn to listen, you'll develop an ability to understand, but you won't develop that ability to express yourself in this new language. So the same with drawing and painting. You just have to accept that you're going to make mistakes, and that's all part of the learning process, I think. Another way then of practicing drawing is sort of still lifes, if you like, just drawing and painting things around the house. And again, other artists use this as well. Certainly still lifes were very popular up until the 19th, maybe early 20th century anyway. If you think of people like Van Gogh, he was always painting walking shoes and boots and things. Vases of flowers, fruit, things like that. And it doesn't have to be very elaborate. Even just an apple or a cup or something, just sit down and draw it for 10 minutes. It's something I still do as regularly as I can. The next thing then, trying to draw people. So this is moving up into a higher level, if you like. People are really difficult to draw. Portraits, figures, if you want to do it in a realistic way. And trying to get a likeness. And part of the problem is if you're drawing, say, an apple, say you're drawing a couple of apples, and one of the apples you draw it a little bit too big, you can still get away with that because we know that some apples are bigger and some apples are smaller. If you got the proportions slightly wrong, people aren't going to notice as much because they'll just think, oh, well, that apple's bigger than that one. When you're drawing people, bodies and hands and faces and things, that's not going to work because if you get the proportions wrong, it's going to look weird. And our brains are so used to looking at faces and interpreting faces and things like that, it'll be immediately obvious that you've made the mistake. So it is more difficult to really get that likeness and to really get figures. Animals are also quite tricky, but I think human figures are even more difficult. So this one, I can't remember if it was from an old photograph or a painting of Paul Gauguin. But again, doing things like that, copying portraits from old artists, sometimes drawing from old photographs. Very good way of practicing as well. To really learn how to draw people, draw figures, what I did eventually was I took some life drawing classes. Now when I say classes, they were described as classes, but they weren't really classes in the sense of teaching. It was basically just, there was a model and you could sit down and draw and paint, and that was it basically. There was somebody who was, in quotes, the teacher, but she or he basically just sort of wandered around, looked at something, made a noise, maybe occasionally a little bit of encouragement maybe, and that was it. It wasn't really teaching as such. But life drawing, and I'm not going to show any drawings that I did from those life drawing classes. I have some, so, but YouTube and social media in general doesn't really like life drawing. So I'm not going to include any in this video. I made up a little bit of some notes on Patreon. I included some in those, but on YouTube I'm not going to include them. But life drawing is really, it's the next level up. I think you're starting to really have to force yourself to get those proportions and things spot on and really accurate. So it's really tough. But if you've got the basics down, some of the basic ideas and things, and you really want to push yourself, I definitely recommend it. It is a big challenge. So just as more practice again, I'll sit down and do little quick sketches based on paintings by painters that I like, things like that. Okay, well, as always, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and hopefully see you in next week's video.